A car horn blared. Then another. Then a third. A minivan rolled slow down the shoulder of a four-lane highway, smoke curling up from under the hood. A woman walked beside the open driver's door, her shoulder pressed against the frame, both legs pushing hard against the asphalt. The van weighed more than 2 tons. She couldn't have been 120 pounds. In the back seat, a child was crying. Another was banging a small fist against the window. Cars flew past at 70 miles an hour. Not one slowed down. Not one stopped. Her name was Sarah Whitlock, and she had 47 minutes to reach a job interview that would decide whether her family had a place to sleep that night. Then a deep rumble rose behind her. A motorcycle. Big one. Slowing down. What happened next, she still can't explain. Stay with me on this one. 3 hours earlier, Sarah Whitlock had been in her apartment counting quarters off the kitchen counter. $12.30. That was every cent she had until Friday. Her 2 boys, Eli and Owen, 6 and 4, sat at the table eating the last of the cereal. No milk, just dry flakes in a bowl. Eli didn't complain. He'd stopped complaining about food a month ago. That was the part that hurt worst. The eviction notice was on the counter. 23 days. That was how long she had before the marshal came. She'd lost her job in February. A receptionist at a dental office. 20 years she'd been there. 2 weeks' notice and a handshake from the same man who'd hugged her at Eli's baptism. The office was being acquired. They didn't need her position anymore. That was the language they used. Didn't need. Her ex-husband hadn't sent a child support check in 6 months. He'd moved to Texas with a woman named Tiffany who posted pictures of vacations on Facebook. Sarah had stopped looking. She had stopped a lot of things. Crying. Calling friends. Hoping. This interview was different. A medical office across 2 counties. Front desk manager. $38,000 a year and benefits. The woman on the phone had said her resume was impressive. Said they were excited to meet her. Said she was the first interview, and they wanted her there at 10 sharp. Sarah had a navy blazer pressed in the back seat. Her best pair of pumps in a plastic bag. A folder with 3 copies of her resume. She'd practiced her answers in the mirror until 2 in the morning. The minivan was a 2003 Honda Odyssey. 286,000 miles. The check engine light had been on since 2019. She knew the rattle in the engine. She knew the way the steering pulled to the right after 40 miles. She knew the brakes squealed when it rained. She just needed it to do this one drive. She got the boys in the back. Her sister Marcy was meeting her at the gas station 10 miles from the medical office. Marcy was going to take the boys for the day. That was the plan. For the first 40 minutes, the van behaved. Then the temperature gauge started climbing. She pulled into a rest stop and put water in the radiator. She'd been doing this for 2 months. She knew the routine. Back on the highway, the gauge climbed again. She made it 12 more miles. That was when the smoke started. White at first, then thicker. Then the engine made a sound she'd never heard before. A low knocking, like something inside was breaking. She managed to get the van across 2 lanes of traffic and onto the shoulder. The hood was steaming. She turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. She got out. She tried to call her sister. No signal. 2 bars and the call wouldn't connect. She looked at the time on her phone. 47 minutes until the interview. The medical office was 19 miles ahead. She didn't have the money for a tow. She didn't have the money for an Uber. She didn't have the money for anything. So she did the only thing she could think of. She put the van in neutral. She opened the driver's door. She put her shoulder against the frame. And she started to push. She wasn't trying to push it 19 miles. She wasn't crazy. She was trying to get it further onto the shoulder, away from the white line, where it might not get hit by a truck before the cops came to give her a ticket for abandoning it. That was all she was trying to do. The boys watched her from the back seat. Eli's eyes were huge. He didn't say a word. The van moved an inch. Then another inch. Cars flew past at 70 miles an hour. She could feel the wind from them. Some of them honked. Not to help, to complain. She was in their way. She kept pushing. Her arms shook. Her legs burned. Sweat ran down her face and into her good interview blouse. She would later say that something happened in those minutes she couldn't describe. A flat, calm certainty that this was it. That this was what her life had become. That nobody was coming. Then she heard the motorcycle. The bike pulled onto the shoulder behind her and stopped. She didn't turn around. She didn't dare. She just kept pushing. The engine cut off. Then she heard boots on the asphalt. Heavy boots. Coming toward her. She closed her eyes for 1 second. She thought about the boys in the back seat. She thought about whether the doors were locked. They weren't. The driver's door was wide open. She turned around. He was a big man. Not just tall. Built. He had to be 6'4", 240 pounds at least. Black leather vest over a long-sleeved black shirt. Jeans. Heavy boots. A beard that came halfway down his chest. Gray at the chin. Tattoos running up both sides of his neck. A bandana tied over his head. He was the kind of man Sarah would have crossed the street to avoid in a parking lot. He stopped about 10 feet from her. He held up both hands. Palms out. Empty. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was deep but quiet. "I'm not gonna come closer. You okay?" Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was locked. He waited. He didn't move. "I'm gonna stay right here," he said. "You got kids in there?" She nodded. "Okay. I'm not gonna come near them. I just want to help you push that van." She looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were brown. He was older than she'd thought. Maybe 60. There were deep lines around his mouth. He looked tired. She said, "I can't pay you anything." He smiled. "Just a little." "Ma'am, I didn't ask for anything." He walked past her, giving her room. He put one hand on the open driver's door. "You in neutral?" She nodded. "Steering's free." She nodded again. "Okay, I'm gonna push. You steer. Just keep it on the shoulder." He put his shoulder against the door frame and leaned. The van started moving. Not an inch at a time. 2 feet. 3. 5. He walked it down the shoulder until they were a good 40 yards from where it had died, well clear of traffic. He stepped back. He was breathing hard but not winded. "All right," he said. "Pop the hood for me?" Sarah hesitated. Then she did it. He went around to the front and lifted it. She came around and stood a few feet behind him. She could see her boys in the rearview mirror. They were watching everything. He looked at the engine for about 90 seconds. He touched a few things. He pulled a rag out of his back pocket and wiped a spot on the engine block. He sniffed the rag. He shook his head. "Yeah," he said. "She's done. Done. Head gasket's gone. Probably cracked the head. Maybe more. This van's not driving anywhere today." Sarah stared at him. Her face didn't move. She just stared at the engine. He saw her face. He stood up straight and closed the hood gently. "What's your name?" he said. "Sarah." "Sarah. Where were you headed?" "Job interview. Medical office. 19 miles from here." "What time?" 40 minutes ago." He nodded slowly. He didn't say anything stupid. He didn't tell her it was okay. He didn't tell her she'd find another job. He just nodded. Then he pulled out his phone. He stepped a few paces away and made a call. "Yeah, it's me. I need a flatbed at mile marker 82, southbound. Honda Odyssey. Tell Carlos to bring the loaner. The blue one." He paused. "Yeah, right now." He came back to her. "My name's Frank," he said. "Frank Delgado. I own a garage about 12 miles up the road. A flatbed is coming for your van. And one of my guys is bringing a loaner car for you. You're going to make your interview." Sarah didn't believe him. She didn't believe any of it. She thought he was lying. She thought there was a catch. "I can't pay for any of this." she said. I know. I heard you the first time. Why are you doing this? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at her boys in the back seat. Because somebody did it for my mother once, he said. And I made her a promise. Sarah's eyes filled up. She turned her face away. She didn't want him to see. Frank pretended he hadn't noticed. He walked over to the side of the van and squatted down so his face was at window level. He waved at Eli. Eli waved back. Owen pressed his hand to the glass. Frank pressed his hand to the glass on the other side. He said something Sarah couldn't hear. Both boys laughed. A truck rumbled past on the highway. Then another. Then the world got quiet again. Sarah stood by the front of her van. She looked at the engine. She looked at the boys laughing at this enormous bearded stranger. She looked at her phone. The interview was 36 minutes away. She allowed herself, for the first time that morning, to think it might still happen. Frank stood up from the window. He came back to her. He held out a small flip phone. Burner, he said. Mine's old. My number's on the back. You call me if there's any trouble. I mean any. She took it. He looked at his watch. Carlos will be here in 9 minutes. For the first time in 3 months, Sarah felt something in her chest she'd almost forgotten the shape of. She thought it was over. She thought the worst was behind her. She had no idea what was coming. A black and white SUV pulled onto the shoulder behind Frank's bike. State trooper. The lights came on. Not the siren. Just the lights. Frank watched it in the side mirror of the van. He didn't move. He didn't look surprised. The trooper got out. He was young. Late 20s. Stiff posture. He hooked his thumbs into his belt and walked up like he was about to write a citation for the world. Ma'am, he said to Sarah. This your vehicle? Yes, sir. Registration. She fumbled in her purse. Her hands were shaking again. She found the paperwork. She handed it to him. He looked at it. He looked at the van. He looked at the boys in the back seat. He looked at Frank. Sir, step away from the vehicle. Frank stepped away from the vehicle. He kept his hands where the trooper could see them. This registration expired 4 months ago, ma'am. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had known that. She hadn't been able to afford the renewal. I know, she said. I was going to. And these boys are unsupervised on the shoulder of a state highway. They're supervised. I'm right here. You were pushing the vehicle, ma'am, with them inside it, while vehicles passed at high speed. That's a child endangerment issue. The word endangerment did something to Sarah's chest. She couldn't get a breath in. Officer, Frank said, very quietly. Can I talk to you for a second? The trooper looked at him. I don't believe I was speaking to you. I know. I'm asking. The trooper sized him up. The leather, the tattoos, the beard. He made a decision about who Frank was, and the decision wasn't a good one. Sir, I'm going to need you to step over to your bike and wait. Frank didn't move. He just said, Bill Hennessy. The trooper blinked. Excuse me? Sergeant Bill Hennessy, your barracks commander. You call him. You tell him Frank Delgado's on scene. He'll tell you what to do. The trooper's face changed. Not all the way, just a flicker. He didn't trust it. But he didn't dismiss it either. He stepped a few paces away and got on his radio. Sarah watched. She didn't understand any of it. She didn't understand why a man with neck tattoos knew the name of a state police barracks commander, or why that name made the trooper's posture loosen. 2 minutes passed. The trooper came back. He handed Sarah her registration. Ma'am, you're going to get the tags renewed within 30 days. Today's a warning. Yes, sir. And the kids stay buckled until the tow comes. Stay in the cab. I'm going to sit behind you with the lights on until that flatbed gets here. Make sure nobody clips you. Thank you. He looked at Frank. Just a quick glance. He gave a tiny nod. Then he walked back to his SUV. Frank exhaled. Just once. Sarah looked at him. What just happened? Frank smiled. I sponsor the Police Benevolent Fund in 3 counties. 22 years. Bill Hennessy was a rookie when I met him. I bought his wife a wheelchair in 2009. Sarah stared at him. Ma'am, you were 1 minute away from a CPS visit. That trooper meant well. He was just young. I needed him to see this different. Sarah sat down on the guardrail. She put her face in her hands. She wasn't crying. She was shaking. Frank didn't try to comfort her. He just stood near her, far enough not to crowd, close enough that she knew he was there. After a minute, she looked up. What kind of garage do you own? He smiled. Bigger than a one-bay, smaller than a dealership. We do work for the highway patrol, the fire marshals, 2 ambulance companies, and a fleet of school buses. I have 11 employees. I take care of them. They take care of the work. She didn't say anything. Look, he said. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be straight with me because in the next 45 minutes a lot is going to happen, and I need to know what I'm working with. Is there anyone waiting for you at home tonight? Anyone who can help you? Family? A friend? Anyone? She shook her head. Your sister. She has 4 kids of her own. And a husband who drinks. She helps where she can. She can't house us. Frank nodded slowly. He looked at the boys in the van. He looked at Sarah's face. He looked at the eviction notice. Sarah hadn't shown it to him, but it was sitting on the dashboard, the bright red letters visible through the windshield. He stepped away. He made another phone call. This one was longer. When he came back, he didn't tell her what he'd said on the call. He just said, Carlos is 2 minutes out. He's bringing a 2019 Sienna. You're driving it to your interview. You're going to walk in there confident. You're going to get that job. We'll deal with everything else after. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more story coming, and you're not going to want to miss what Sarah finds when she gets back from that interview. A blue flatbed pulled onto the shoulder, followed by a clean white minivan. A man in coveralls got out of the flatbed. Another man got out of the loaner. They moved with the kind of efficiency that comes from doing the same thing 100 times. Sarah stood up. Her legs were unsteady, but they held. She looked at Frank. Why? He smiled. I'll tell you the whole story when you get back. She got the boys out of the dead van. She got them into the loaner. The car seats had already been swapped over. She didn't know when that had happened. She thought maybe she'd missed it. She thought maybe she was missing a lot of things. She drove away from the shoulder of that highway at exactly 15 minutes before her interview. She had no idea what was waiting for her when she came back. She made the interview with 4 minutes to spare. She walked into the medical office in her pressed blazer and her good pumps with sweat still drying at her hairline. She checked her face in the loaner's mirror 3 times. She told herself she had nothing left to lose. She told herself it was already a miracle she was even there. The office manager who met her was a woman named Patricia. Patricia was around Sarah's age. Patricia took her hand and said, "We were worried you weren't going to make it. Are you all right?" Sarah said, "I had some car trouble. I'm sorry I'm not at my best." Patricia said, "Let's get you some water." The interview was supposed to be 30 minutes. It went 72. Sarah talked about her 20 years at the dental office. She talked about insurance billing systems she'd built from scratch. She talked about the patients she'd known by name, the way she'd remembered which kids had which fears, which elderly men needed an extra minute getting into a chair. Patricia listened to all of it. The doctor came in halfway through and sat down and listened too. At the end, Patricia stood up and shook her hand and said, "Sarah, I'm not allowed to formally offer you a job until tomorrow morning when I clear it with payroll. But I want you to know how I'm thinking about this." Sarah nodded. "The job is yours if you want it. We'd like you to start a week from Monday." Sarah didn't cry in front of her. She thanked her. She walked out of the office. She walked across the parking lot. She got into the loaner Sienna. She closed the door. She put her hands on the steering wheel. Then she cried for 9 minutes straight. The boys were quiet in the back. Eli reached up and put his small hand on her shoulder. He didn't say anything. He just kept his hand there until she stopped. She drove back to mile marker 82. The flatbed was gone. Her old van was gone. The state trooper was gone. The shoulder was empty. She drove on. Frank had given her the address of his garage. She put it in the GPS 12 miles. She didn't know what she was driving toward. The garage was on the edge of a small town. It was bigger than she'd expected. A long, low building, gray with 6 bay doors. The sign above the door said Delgado Motors in block letters. No flair. No fancy logo. There were a dozen cars in the front lot. Trucks. SUVs. One ambulance. She parked the loaner near the office door. She got the boys out. Frank came out of the office wiping his hands on a rag. He was in different clothes. Clean denim work shirt. Same boots. The bandana was gone. His hair was tied back. "How'd it go?" he said. Sarah said, "I got it." Frank closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened them and smiled. It was a smile she would remember for the rest of her life. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting for a piece of good news for somebody else for a very long time. "Come inside," he said. "Both little men too. I got snacks. And I got something to show you." He led them into the office. He gave the boys juice boxes and crackers and pointed them at a couch that had a TV on the wall in front of it. He turned on cartoons. The boys settled in like they'd lived there their whole lives. Then he took Sarah through the office and out a back door into the main service bay. Her van was in the 3rd bay. It didn't look like her van. The dents along the side panel had been pulled out. There were no dents now. The fender that had been crooked since 2018 was straight. The 2 tires that had been bald were new. The 2 that had been okay were new also. The cracked taillight was new. The side mirror that had been duct taped on was a real mirror now, professionally mounted. The hood was up. 2 men in coveralls were leaning over the engine. There was a rebuilt engine block sitting on a stand next to them. It was clean. It looked like an engine that was going to last. Carlos, the man who'd brought the loaner, turned around. He grinned. "We were hoping you'd come back before we finished. Want to see what we're doing?" Sarah couldn't speak. Frank stepped up beside her. "It's not a new van," he said. "I won't lie to you. It's still a 2003 Odyssey with 286,000 miles. But the engine's rebuilt. The transmission's flushed and serviced. Brakes are new. All 4 tires are new. Battery is new. Belts are new. Suspension is gone over. I had the boys check everything. She's good for another 70,000 miles if you take care of her. Maybe 100. Sarah said. "Frank, inspection's good through next year. Tags are renewed. Insurance is paid up for 6 months. That was the call I made earlier. I have an agent who owes me a favor. Frank, there's also a credit at the local Goodyear for any tire issue. And there's a card in your glove compartment with my number, Carlos's number, and the after-hours line. Anything goes wrong with this van for the next year, you call us. We come." "Frank, I can't." "Sarah." He turned to face her. "I'm not done." She closed her mouth. He reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out a white envelope. He held it out to her. "Don't open this here. Open it when you get home tonight, after the boys are asleep." She took the envelope. She held it. She didn't know what was in it. "I have one more thing," he said. "Then I'll let you go." He walked her to the open bay door. He pointed at the lot. "There's a key on the hook by the office door. It goes to a 2014 Ford Escape. Low miles. Clean. We use it as a courtesy car for elderly customers. I don't need it. It's parked behind the building. You drive it for as long as your boys are little and you need 2 cars or until you don't. No paperwork. No payments. When you don't need it anymore, you bring it back." Sarah's hands were over her mouth. Frank put one hand on her shoulder. Just for a second. Then he let it go. I told you somebody did this for my mother once. I owe her a debt. I've been paying it for 38 years. You're not the first. You won't be the last. But today you're who I get to help. She finally found her voice. Why me? He smiled. Because you stopped on the shoulder, ma'am. Because you didn't quit. Because you pushed a 2-ton van by yourself with your boys inside, and you didn't ask anyone for anything, and you were still trying to make that interview when you couldn't even get the engine to crank. People who try that hard. Those are the ones I look for. She stood in his garage. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just hugged him. He hugged her back, careful, like he was afraid of breaking her. She drove home that night in the Ford Escape. Her old van was staying in Frank's garage for 2 more days to finish a couple of small jobs. The Escape was clean inside, smelled like nothing, drove like a dream. The boys fell asleep in the back before they hit the highway. When she got home, she carried Eli in first. Then Owen. She tucked them in. She kissed both their foreheads. Eli woke up just enough to whisper, "Mom, was today real?" She said, "Yeah, baby. It was real." He went back to sleep. She sat at the kitchen table. The eviction notice was still on the counter. 23 days. She took out the white envelope. She opened it. Inside was a cashier's check. The amount was $12,000. There was a small folded note. The handwriting was big and careful. It said, "This is not charity. This is what you would have been paid if you'd been hired into my apprentice program in 2007 when you needed it. You didn't apply because you didn't know it existed. So I'm paying the back wages now. Use it for rent. Use it for whatever you want. It's yours. No strings. No follow-up calls. No obligations." 50. She read the note 4 times. Then she put it on the table. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She just sat in her kitchen and looked at the check and breathed. She paid the back rent the next morning. She paid 2 months ahead. She paid off the electric bill. She bought groceries for 2 weeks. She filled the Escape with gas. She put $1,100 into a savings account she'd had to close 5 years ago. The bank teller looked at the deposit slip twice. Sarah told her she'd just gotten back to work. She started at the medical office a week later. Patricia introduced her to the staff. Sarah cried in the bathroom on her first break. She fixed her makeup. She went back out. She did her job. She went to Frank's garage once a month for the next 2 years. She brought him coffee. She brought him pies her sister Marcy baked. She tried twice to give him money. He refused both times. He said, "Bring me pies. Don't bring me money." The boys started calling him Uncle Frank. He came to Eli's school play. He came to Owen's birthday party. He brought a piñata he'd built himself out of plywood and rope because, he said, the cardboard ones didn't last. Sarah found out, slowly, the things he hadn't told her that first day. She found out that Frank had grown up in a trailer outside Albuquerque. His mother, Dolores, had raised him alone after his father left. She had worked 2 jobs. One of them as a maid at a motel off the interstate. One winter night, her car had broken down on a frozen stretch of highway with Frank in the back seat. A long-haul trucker had stopped. He'd gotten her to a phone. He'd waited with them until a tow came. He'd paid for the repair out of his own pocket. He'd refused to give his name. He'd said, "Pass it on someday." Dolores had died of cancer when Frank was 31. The last thing she'd said to him in the hospital was about that trucker. Frank had started his garage with $3,000 and a lot of borrowed tools. He had kept his promise. He had been keeping it for 38 years. Sarah, by year 3, was the one Frank called when he found a single mother on the shoulder. She kept a duffel bag in the back of the Escape. Snacks, coloring books, water, first aid kit, a folder with names of legal aid offices, food banks, 2 pediatricians who took uninsured patients, the local family shelter. She had built it slowly. She knew what helped and what didn't. She got promoted at the medical office in her 2nd year. Then again in her 4th. She bought a small house when Eli started 7th grade. Not a big house. A small one with a fenced yard and a maple tree out front. The boys had their own rooms for the first time in their lives. She told Eli the story of the broken van in pieces over the years. He remembered Frank's face at the window. He remembered the pressing of hands on the glass. He didn't remember much else. He didn't need to. When Eli turned 18, he asked Sarah if she could ask Frank a question for him. She said, "What's the question?" Eli said, "I want to ask him if I can apprentice at the garage. Not because of what he did for us. Because of the way he is. I want to learn that." Sarah called Frank that night. Frank cried on the phone. She had never heard him do that before. Eli started at Delgado Motors 3 weeks after his high school graduation. He worked the front counter for the first year. Then he moved into the bays. Frank trained him on engines the way an old craftsman trains an apprentice. Slow, honest, detailed. Frank turned 68 that summer. He told Sarah, quietly, that he wanted Eli to take over the shop when he was ready. He said, "He's gonna run it the way I did. I can already see it. I'm just gonna train him longer than I trained anybody else, because I want him to be sure." Sarah said, "You don't have to." Frank said, "Yes, I do." On the 10th anniversary of the day her van broke down, Sarah drove the same highway. Mile marker 82. Same shoulder. She wasn't broken down. She was driving home from a meeting. She saw a woman standing next to a car. The hood was up. There were 2 children in the back seat. The woman was on her phone, but she was crying, and the call wasn't connecting. Sarah pulled over. She got out. She held up both hands. Palms out. Empty. "Ma'am," she said, "I'm not going to come too close. Are you okay?" The woman looked at her. Sarah smiled. "Stay with me," she said. "Let's figure this out." And she did.